As the race to make the playoffs is heating up, the NASCAR Cup Series returns to the hills of Pocono. This 2.5-mile oval track is anything but ordinary. Often referred to as the Tricky Triangle, the three-turn layout presents unique challenges to both the drivers and their crews. Like the three turns of Pocono, there are three keys to victory today: speed, strategy, and a bit of luck. Which crews can piece together the right strategy? Which drivers can get the most speed out of the rides? And who will find the favor of Lady Luck? Join us as we discuss the 160 adrenaline-filled laps of the Great American Getaway 400. Welcome to our Pocono race review. In the background of this video, you'll see some gameplay from NASCAR Thunder 2003 at Pocono, racing with Dale Jr. to celebrate his Xfinity Series win, his first as a crew chief. He's the third person to win in the Xfinity Series as a driver, owner, and now as a pit crew chief. We also may have gameplay, depending on how long the video goes, from NASCAR Heat 5 with Denny Hamlin, because that was one of my picks today to win. Let's go ahead and take a look at the qualifying results for today's race. In first, we have Denny Hamlin. Second, Chris Buescher. Third, Carson Hocevar. Fourth, John Hunter Nemechek. Fifth, Cole Custer. Sixth, Chase Briscoe. Seventh, Ty Gibbs. Eighth, Tyler Reddick. Ninth, Christopher Bell. And 10th, Daniel Suarez. So the big news leading into this week was how would Denny Hamlin perform coming back from his 1 week off. He missed 1 week due to the birth of his son, so congrats to Denny Hamlin once more. And Denny Hamlin, he came back with a hot start, going ahead and taking the pole position in qualifying. William Byron ends up starting from the back of the field due to wrecking in qualifying, and that was a real shame because he was fastest in practice. But instead of going to a backup car, which most people, including myself, assumed they would do, they ended up just fixing the primary car and going back out there. Today's race was originally scheduled to begin 2 hours earlier than it ended up kicking off. There was a rain delay, and during the rain delay, Prime continued their fantastic coverage. They kept it serious, and they kept the viewers interested. They just reviewed storylines, they reviewed key track facts. They really kept the pre-race coverage going. A lot of times, when Fox or NBC will have rain delays, they'll either throw it back to another documentary that they already have, or they'll just have this really silly coverage that ends up losing a lot of viewers. But I thought Amazon Prime did a great job of keeping people interested and really informing the viewer what was to come. During the rain delay, they interviewed both Ricky Stenhouse and Carson Hocevar, who both really seemed like they wanted this whole beef to blow over. Coming off of their incidents at Nashville and Mexico City, it seemed like it was going to be a continued rivalry, and Ricky was really heated after the Mexico City race, so we were waiting to see if revenge was going to come at Pocono, which is not a good track for revenge, and that could have ended very poorly had they decided to go that route. But it seems like cooler heads prevailed, but we will keep an eye on that as we go throughout the race. Alright, let's go into stage 1. Denny Hamlin leads them off. William Byron was working his way through the field pretty well early on. Early in the race, Denny was already aero blocking on Chris Buescher in stage 1. Prime ended up showing an animation that perfectly demonstrated this effect. So it showed how the cars lose drag and downforce when they enter the wake of the leading car. So in the straightaways, it ends up helping them, but once they go into the corners where they really need that extra downforce, it ends up hurting them. One thing that I had to note from the Prime coverage is that I love how many of the commercials are NASCAR related and featuring NASCAR drivers and team. That's something you don't really see much on the network television and cable television. In stage 1, Carson Hocevar ends up getting loose and almost spin. Carl Edwards called it the save of the year, so we'll throw up an image of that on screen. The thing that was more impressive about this whole spinning situation is even though he almost wrecked, Carson Hocevar only dropped from 3rd to 4th. He ended up losing a few positions after that, but during the initial recovery, he only lost 1 position. Lap 22, Brennan Poole was on screen. Brennan Poole was the one and only open car in today's race. I thought they had a pretty eye-catching scheme, so we'll mention that whenever he pops up. Lap 25, Brad Keselowski had already moved up 5 positions. Lap 26, Daniel Suarez began the green flag pit stop cycle, trying to flip the stage. And at lap 30, Denny Hamlin takes stage 1, so starting off hot, coming off of his week off. Let's take a look at these stage 1 results. We have Denny Hamlin in first, Chris Buescher second, Tyler Reddick third. In fourth, we have Chase Briscoe. Fifth is Eric Jones. Sixth is Zane Smith. Seventh is Joey Logano. 8th is Chase Elliott. 9th, William Byron. And 10th, Alex Bowman. So that's really impressive for William Byron to make his way up through the field. and as well as Alex Bowman, because by and large, the Hendrick cars did not qualify well. Now these standings are somewhat skewed. A few drivers did pit before the stage to try to flip the stage due to strategy, so that kind of messes with the results, but still impressive, and they came up and got stage points, so that's good to see. As a result of the Stage 1 caution, Cody Ware was the lucky dog. He got his lap back. And then on lap 36, Stage 2 begins. Ty Gibbs and Brad Keselowski lead them off. And with a huge push from Carson Hocevar, Brad Keselowski takes the lead, Hocevar to second place. Lap 42, Riley Herbst cuts down a tire in turn 1 and gets into the outside wall with a very hard impact. This ultimately brings out a caution, to which Brennan Poole was the lucky dog. On lap 49, on the restart, Brad Keselowski leads them off. Carson Hocevar keeps P2. On lap 54, Bubba Wallace blows a right front in turn 2 and makes hard contact with the outside wall. As his car was hitting the wall, they were saying Alex Bowman had a tire going down on the previous run, so it's just very weird timing. We were seeing a lot of cars with issues cutting down tires, and that somewhat continues throughout the race. During the slow motion replay, it indicated that perhaps he blew out the right front rotor. That is what ended up cutting his tire down. So now we have Riley Herbst and we've had Bubba Wallace both cut down tires, so the third 2311 car, Tyler Reddick, was living in fear. You could hear it in his voice that he was really worried that they would start to have issues. Now, during this caution sequence, Brad Keselowski ends up pitting from the lead on a closed pit road. So that sends Brad to the tail end of the field. Completely ruins the strategy he was on at the time and takes him out of the lead. They thought it was open. It was just a miscommunication between his team and Brad, and that's going to have ripple effects throughout their day. Also during this caution cycle, Ryan Blaney with a speeding penalty, so he also has to go to the back. So two very good cars having to go to the tail end of the field. Lap 61, Joey Logano leads the restart, Alex Bowman up to P2. On lap 63, Alex Bowman ends up making the pass for P1. Now, it got interesting for a while. Stenhouse and Hocevar, they were running P3 and P4. This was really impressive because Stenhouse was playing strategy, that's how he ended up so far forward. But Carson Hocevar restarted 19th and ended up making 15 positions in just a couple laps. It was just a very impressive run. But then once Carson got to Ricky, he really let Ricky have a lot of leeway. Carson probably had the faster car at this point in the race, but fearing the retaliation and just wanting to gain back some of the respect, he ends up letting Ricky keep P3. On lap 72, another tire down, Michael McDowell has a rotor explode, but he's able to limp it back to pit road. On lap 73, Josh Berry pits. And on lap 74, Chase Briscoe pits. This is important. These aren't just two cars making green flag stops. This timing really works out in their favor because on lap 78, there's a caution for debris, which I was wondering when they were going to throw that caution for debris, because if Michael McDowell lost a rotor out on the track, that debris is still going to be out there somewhere, and that, could end up ruining someone's day. So they end up throwing the caution. On lap 81, the race restarts with Hocevar starting P1. Stenhouse and Hocevar elected to stay out. Chase Briscoe ends up taking the lead, and William Byron ends up coming up to P4. Brad makes his way back up to 6th place. On lap 83, Denny Hamlin and a group of many other drivers end up getting into the wall on the exit of turn 3. Just slight contact, they all continue on. And then also on lap 83, Kyle Busch spins, collecting Ty Dillon, Christopher Bell, and Shane Van Gisbergen. And I think Todd Gilliland may have also gotten damage. It either happened here or maybe in an earlier incident, but that Grillo's pickle car had damage on the front end. I have no clue where it came from. The replay didn't really inform me on that, but it's sad to see the pickle car end up taking damage. On lap 88, they restart. Chase Briscoe leads them off, with Stenhouse holding strong on the outside, and they ran side by side for a couple laps, even though Stenhouse was on much older tires. Chase Briscoe ends up taking the lead and holding it, and on lap 91, Brennan Poole is on screen. Chase Briscoe ends up taking stage 2. Let's go ahead and look at the stage 2 results. We have Chase Briscoe in 1st, Josh Berry 2nd. In 3rd, we have Chase Elliott. 4th, William Byron. 5th, Chris Buescher. 6th, Denny Hamlin. 7th, Austin Cindric. 8th, Ryan Blaney. 9th, Kyle Larson. And 10th, Carson Hocevar. So we have an interesting mix of drivers. We had some guys that had kind of used strategy to make their way to the front, and we have fast cars that got mired back in traffic due to things outside of their control. So guys like Carson Hocevar, Denny Hamlin, Ryan Blaney, they all had fast cars, but they ended up making their way further back over and over, but continually finding their way towards the front end of the field. So impressive runs for those guys, at least early on. And I would like to point out Austin Cindric in 7th. This track really does suit him because he is very skilled on these flatter, more road course-esque tracks. This isn't a road course, but considering that each of the 3 turns are all different from each other, it suits Austin Cindric's driving style. So he ended up having a pretty good day and was competitive throughout the race. So coming into stage 2, William Byron pits for 4th. He was one of the few drivers to pit. He was hoping that the strategy would work out and he would be able to flip the next stage and only have one more stop to go. Interesting strategy. Not many other people bought into it, and we'll see how that works out for him a little later. On lap 101, Chase Briscoe leads them off to start stage 3. And as a result, what we were just talking about, Byron pitting from 4th, William Byron gets stacked up. Ty Gibbs and several other drivers check up in front of him. He ends up getting into the back of, I think, lap 101. Chase Briscoe leads him off to start stage 3. And immediately after, William Byron gets stacked up behind a mess of other drivers checking up. That's the risk you take when you end up back in the field. You may end up getting mixed up in someone else's incident, which William Byron was. It is important to note William Byron was having issues with his steering box. I'm not sure what the issue was, but I think that may have caused the fall off of his day, especially after the strategy didn't go his way on this call. But they really never recovered, and William Byron had the speed earlier in the race, so I believe it was that steering issue, but I don't have confirmation on that. On lap 119, the green flag pit cycle begins, so many of the competitive cars were already coming in, and they were on the very edge of the fuel window, so many of these guys were coming in with 43 to go to 40 to go, and it was very close. Brad Keselowski ends up assuming the lead through these green flag pit stops, and his idea was to run as long as he could, because he had clean air, he was running very fast laps, he had a fast car throughout the day, and right when he gets clean racetrack, lap 124, there's a caution on the speedway. Shane Van Gisbergen loses it, and Brad Keselowski, it ends up ruining his strategy. So for the second time in today's race, Brad Keselowski's plans have been ruined. Lap 131, Chase Briscoe leads the restart with Denny Hamlin P2. Now this was one of the longer runs in the race, and throughout this run, fuel savings and even the glare off the sun were both becoming issues. This race was supposed to start 2 hours earlier, so it starting later in the day made the sun become more of a factor. Usually if teams know ahead of time that the sun's going to be a factor, they'll install tinted visors, or they may have tinted tear-offs, to help the drivers see, but these teams didn't anticipate that, so they'd showed an in-car camera view at one point. Denny Hamlin was raising his left hand off the steering wheel to block the glare of the sun so he could see his braking points going into the corners. The fuel savings really were a big issue, especially for Chase Briscoe, our leader. They were only on pit road for 11 seconds, which the broadcast made very clear to the viewers. Everyone else was on pit road for 14 to 15 seconds, so either Chase Briscoe had saved a lot of fuel in the previous run, or he didn't have enough fuel to make it. So throughout this, it was a battle between Chase Briscoe and P1 trying to save as much as he could while maintaining the lead, somewhat aero blocking, to Denny Hamlin and P2. Now, these are teammates competing with each other, so it was an interesting chess match between them. There was this discussion of, well, is Denny trying to run him out of fuel because it doesn't look like it? Is Denny Hamlin just back there saving tires? So we really didn't know until the last lap whether Chase Briscoe was going to make it or not, but they kept showing this interesting graphic. Prime has been doing this throughout their coverage, showing the burn bar and showing a calculated miles per gallon graphic. And Chase Briscoe was saving more than the rest of the field, so he was doing his job. But it was interesting. We all thought Denny Hamlin would close in, and he never quite had the car that he needed. And it seems like perhaps this was the worst his car was throughout the day. If this was earlier in the race, earlier in the day, maybe he would have been able to make the pass, but he just wasn't able to get to Chase Briscoe to really put much pressure on him. With that said, Chase Briscoe ends up winning at Pocono and locking himself into the playoffs. Let's go ahead and look at the race results. In first, we have Chase Briscoe receiving 57 points. In second, we have Denny Hamlin with 51 points. And in third, we have Ryan Blaney. Fourth, Chris Buescher. Fifth, Chase Elliott. Sixth, John Hunter Nemechek. Seventh, Kyle Larson. Eighth, Ryan Preece. Ninth, Brad Keselowski, again with a frustrating day, but they made the most of it. And each time they set themselves back, they ended up coming back through the field, but it's just going to be a day of what if. This was probably their day. They could have locked Brad into the playoffs, and how poorly they were running earlier in the season, that would have been forgotten. Suddenly they would have been in the playoff hunt and focusing on those last 10 races, but now we'll never know. In 10th, we have Austin Cindric. 11th, Alex Bowman. In 12th, Josh Berry. 13th, Eric Jones. 14th, Ty Gibbs. 15th, Daniel Suarez. 16th, Joey Logano. 17th, Christopher Bell. 18th, Carson Hocevar. 19th, Justin Haley. 20th, Kyle Busch. Kyle Busch with a frustrating day. They never really showed speed or signs of promise. They were really looking forward to today's race. It sounded like they were confident and maybe had a few things figured out, but that is not how it played out. They had the one incident where Kyle Busch spun, but also he ended up just never really showing speed or any signs of life. I kept looking back at the leaderboard, hey, where's Kyle? Where's Kyle? And he'd be mid-20s. He might be in the lower half of the top 20 at best, but really just a poor day for Kyle Busch. In 21st, we have AJ Allmendinger. 22nd, Cole Custer. 23rd, we have Noah Gragson. 24th, we have Austin Dillon. 25th, we have Zane Smith. 26th, Ross Chastain. 27th, William Byron, which, as I noted earlier, it may have been a steering issue that held him back because William Byron had more speed, at least earlier in the run. In 28th, we have Todd Gilliland. 29th, Cody Ware. 30th, Ricky Stenhouse Jr. 31st, we have Shane Van Gisbergen. 32nd, Tyler Reddick, the 1:23:11 car that didn't blow a rotor, even though they did have to go behind the wall at one point. I'm not sure why they went behind the wall, but they were looking, I believe, in the right front, so they may have believed they had a rotor about to expire. So, that's good for Tyler Reddick. They really can't take him being injured this late in the year. So, good for them to err on the side of caution. But a disappointing day overall for all of 23:11. In 33rd, we have Ty Dillon. He got caught up in the Kyle Busch incident. I believe he broke a right rear toe link, so he wasn't able to continue. 34th, we have Brennan Poole. 35th, Michael McDowell, another car that had the rotor issues. 36th, we have Bubba Wallace. And 37th, Riley Hurd, the other two 23:11 cars. So not a great day for them. Let's go ahead and look at the point. So I've had to pull this graphic right from the broadcast because it takes a while for NASCAR to update the points in the playoff bubble. So at the time of recording this, it didn't exist. That's why we're using this graphic. So in first, we have Kyle Larson with 3 wins, Denny Hamlin as well, Christopher Bell with 3 wins. And then in fourth, we have William Byron with 1 win, Ryan Blaney with 1 win. Sixth, we have Joey Logano, Austin Cindric, Chase Briscoe, Josh Berry, Shane Van Gisbergen, and Ross Chastain. That rounds out our locked-in drivers. And for the drivers without a win, we have Chase Elliott in 12th, 160 to the good. We have Tyler Reddick in 13th with 107 points to the good. In 14th, we have Chris Buescher, 38 points to the good. In 15th, we have Bubba Wallace with 29 points to the good. And then right on the cut line, we have Alex Bowman with 20 points to the good. Then below the cut line, we have Ryan Preece, 20 under. We have AJ Allmendinger, 59 points under. Eric Jones, 62 points under. And Kyle Busch, 63 points under. Now, if we get another driver that wins below this cut line, that will knock Alex Bowman out of the playoffs. So they need to be looking for more points over the next few races to really secure their position into the chase. As we close in on the playoffs, this bubble is going to become very tight. It's going to be very interesting to see how it goes. So we're going to keep an eye on this throughout the next few weeks. Pocono does wrap up Amazon Prime's coverage of the NASCAR Cup Series. They've done a fantastic job since coming into the sport, and I really look forward to their coverage next season. And in future seasons, I would love for them to take up more of the schedule. Maybe not the whole thing, because once there's no competition, the need to excel drops. But if you do miss this Amazon Prime crew, don't worry. Many of them will be transferring over to TNT, so you will see many familiar faces. And it looks like that booth will be pretty good. So look for their coverage over on TNT the next few weeks, and I believe NBC will be taking over after them. So no worries going forward. Hopefully it'll be almost as good as this Amazon Prime coverage, though they won't be able to quite match the product that Prime has been putting on. The constant side-by-sides, no full-screen ads. That's just the limitations of being on a streamer versus being on broadcast television. I've really enjoyed their pre-race coverage. I've enjoyed their coverage of practice and qualifying. I've been seeing them get a lot of views on YouTube when they've been streaming live on YouTube. The hour of post-race coverage is fantastic. It harkens back to the era of NASCAR Victory Lane, if you guys can remember that being on the Speed channel. So it's been fantastic. I've really enjoyed their coverage. It's made these races even more exciting to watch, even more fun to follow. But yes, if you wonder where they're going over to TNT. So look for that next week. And looking forward to this next week, the Truck Series will be racing at Lime Park on Fox Sports 1. Then I believe on Friday we have the Xfinity race on the CW. And then we have NASCAR, the Cup Series, going to Echo Park Speedway. That is Atlanta Motor Speedway. They have a rights deal, so they've renamed the speedway. Not a huge fan of that, but it is what it is. But yes, look for the Cup Series at Atlanta next weekend. And before we end the video, I would like to thank you guys for the support in these recent NASCAR uploads, for these race reviews and these race previews. And also, I've been streaming a lot of NASCAR 2005 Chase for the Cup. So if that's something you're interested in, or if you'd like to see these uploads continue, maybe subscribe and leave a like. And if you dislike it, dislike it. And hopefully, I'll see you guys in the next one.